next 20 years in national forest land. So it's a wilderness area, it's vast, and the Boundary Waters is a renowned recreational destination. The Forest Service maintains 2,000 campsites in the Boundary Waters, each with a latrine and fire grate. The service also maintains 160 miles of hiking trails and hundreds of portages connecting lakes and rivers. Fishing enthusiasts travel from across the United States and beyond to fish in its pristine waters for northern pike, bass, walleye, and lake trout. And even in the harsh winters of northern Minnesota, the Boundary Waters is a destination for winter camping, snowshoeing, cross-country skiing, and ice fishing. To help preserve its wilderness character, the Forest Service restricts the number of visitors and limits their use in the Boundary Waters. The Boundary Waters is the most heavily used wilderness area in the entire Forest Service system, with an estimated 250,000 visitors each year. Overnight camping is by permit only, with daily limits at the required entry points during the busy season from May through September. Groups are limited by their regulations and size to no more than 9 persons and to the number of canoes that can be in a party. Camping is only permitted in designated campsites. Visitors may not bring food in glass or metal containers. Forest Service officers actively monitor canoeists and campsites to ensure compliance with these requirements. Leave no trace is the standard for visiting this wilderness area. Simply put, too many people can spoil a good thing. Man-made structures have mostly been removed from the Boundary Waters. There are practically no signs or blazes marking portages or trails. Detailed maps are available to aid in navigating through the Boundary Waters, where it seems like from a distance and perched on a canoe seat, every lakeshore, every rock outcrop, every tree line looks about the same. One does not enter the Boundary Waters without a good map and a compass. A journey to the Boundary Waters begins with planning. When do you visit? How long will you plan to stay? Will you plan to move each day to a new lake and a new campsite? How fit and experienced are you with traveling by canoe and portaging all of your gear? Once you determine a route, you will want to secure an entry permit, which allows your access to one of the 70-some entry points. Approximately 250 permits are available per day, spread out among those entry points in a manner designed to limit traffic and enhance the wilderness experience for each visitor. As I said, too many people can spoil a good thing. Unlike national parks, which have entry through a gatehouse where fees are collected, the Boundary Waters is entered only through one of these limited entry points. You must enter on the day of your permit and only at a specified entry point. Once in, you may stay as long as you wish. Camping is only allowed in a designated campsite. There is no reservation system for campsites, so it's first come, first serve, but with the expectation that you will share your campsite with another group if they're in trouble and they can't get to an open campsite. Packing for a Boundary Waters visit is not quite as meticulous, we've found, as backpacking trip packing, where each ounce matters when you have to carry every ounce every foot. But packing decisions still matter because ultimately you're going to carry everything you pack. So tent, sleeping gear, food and cooking equipment, personal items, and clothing are basic categories, plus a canoe, life jackets, paddles, and perhaps some fishing equipment and a camera. compasses, maps, and rain gear, maybe a book to read, some favorite snacks. Temperatures in July can range from the mid-30s to the upper 90s. Oh yes, and bug spray.
Food, the all-important food. We eat mostly one-pot meals made from foods we package at home. Steve does most, no, pretty much all of the cooking. We work on the menus together. I package the food and Steve cooks. Breakfast on the first morning is usually fried eggs and bacon and pita bread or tortilla shells with peanut butter and jam, and coffee, of course. Other breakfasts include pancakes with peanut butter, oatmeal fortified with walnuts, cranberries, and raisins. If we need a quick breakfast or don't want to start up the stove, we'll have peanut butter on granola bars. Peanut butter is our wonder food. It provides good fuel for hiking, paddling the canoe, and carrying heavy packs. Lunches are mostly trail mix, nuts, granola bars, and dried fruit. Dinners include macaroni and cheese with tuna, quinoa or couscous with packaged chicken, Alfredo noodles, and it all tastes so good out in the outdoors. And sometimes we'll have dessert, a packaged cookie mix made with just water and slowly cooked in the skillet. It doesn't really matter if it's not cooked all the way through. Actually, it's better if it's not cooked all the way through. And we have our special treats. For Steve, it's Fritos. For me, it's Dove dark chocolate.
We typically carry a large backpack called a Duluth bag. Duluth as in Duluth, Minnesota. A second pack that is waterproof for sleeping bags and clothing, and a hard plastic food barrel, sometimes called a bear barrel. It's designed to be bear-proof. A typical canoeist can travel across water about 3 miles per hour. Portages can range from a few yards to over 2 miles. We double portage, meaning we take 2 loaded trips across the portage. Loaded, back empty, and loaded again. Other parties will pack lighter, move more quickly, and can carry everything across in one trip. That's a single portage. Our packs usually weigh from 40 to 60 pounds, and the newer canoes can weigh less than 45 pounds. Some routes have lots of water and not many portages. Other routes have small lakes and long distances between them. I think one more. Yeah. Okay. So we want to share a little bit about experiencing the Boundary Waters. Our experiences in the Boundary Waters have been shaped by friendship, shaped by the way the Boundary Waters is managed as a wilderness, shaped by our desire to be away from day-to-day work life here, and shaped by a willingness to spend time in a challenging, simple, beautiful place with only the essential things with us: shelter, bed, food, and a canoe.
Story 1, weather, lightning, and windstorms. All our trips to the Boundary Waters have been in the month of July, and as Steve mentioned, the temperatures can range from the low 30s to the high 90s. July is prime thunderstorm month. We've been very fortunate not to have been involved in some very serious thunderstorms, but we're always aware of the weather. We actually carry a small wind-up weather radio to give us some idea of general weather. It's not like here in Indiana where storms move from the south to the north or from the west to the east. That's not the way it works. That whole system of rivers and lakes creates their own weather patterns, and storms can pop up in a very short time, like minutes, and temperatures can drop instantly. On one trip with Deb and Jack, it was a very hot and muggy July day, and we had crossed at least a dozen portages. Unloading our gear, carrying it across the portage, reloading our gear into the canoe, paddling across the lake, and so forth, over and over and over. It was sunny, and we were tired, but we started hearing a little distant rumble. We had one more portage to complete before we got to our destination. As we were paddling to a campsite, we could see the big, dark clouds rolling our way. Then we could see the rain across the lake. We made it to land just in time to unload our canoes and get our rain suits on. Then there was a downpour like I had not experienced before. Since the ground is mostly rock, water does not soak in like around here, so we were standing in 3 to 4 inches of water. After the rain stopped, Steve very calmly got out his bag of Fritos and started munching away. I was not quite as pleasant as he was about that whole situation. Before we set up our tent, we always make sure we are out of the way of any dangerous trees that might blow down. As I said, the land surface is mostly rock, and the trees are mostly pine. You may know that pine tree roots don't go down very far into the ground. They spread out just under the surface, or in the case of the boundary waters, mostly on top of the ground. So it doesn't take much wind for trees to fall over. At each campsite, we talk about where to go in case of close lightning. Most of the storms we've experienced have been at night, of course, which is the scariest time for me anyway. That's when you realize your tent is just a very thin layer of nylon, not much protection from wind and lightning. Many nights I've been awakened by the flash of lightning, and then I start counting seconds until I hear the rumble of thunder. And we try to determine how far away the storm is. Each flash of lightning causes terror for me. Each thunder roll can be felt through the rock surface. After the storm passes by and the night sky is clear and stars are shining, then I can finally sleep. What do we learn from the storms?
Take the bad with the good.
Sometimes the brightest stars shine after the storm.
Here's a story about the Iron Lake mosquito dance. Fishing on Iron Lake was the best we'd experienced in the several trips we had made with our friends Deb and Jack. After setting up camp that day, Jack and I headed out in a canoe and started getting hits from walleye. We'd found a good spot. A good spot until the clouds turned dark and a breeze took up, indicating an approaching storm. We just made it back to our campsite as the rain and wind moved in. So we dove into our tents to wait out the storm. As it passed, we climbed out and started preparing a fish dinner. Then the mosquitoes started on us. Swarms, great multitudes, as we struggled to stir the cooking food. Then hoods up, unrolled pant legs down, hats pulled down, we each held a plate with supper as the mosquitoes attacked. We kept walking swiftly around in circles on our campsite, trying to catch bites as we were getting bitten. Then another quick dive into our tents, and the Iron Lake mosquito dance was over. What did we learn that day?
This too shall pass.
And I still hate mosquitoes.
Here's a story about a bear that visited us one dinner. It sounds like all of our exciting adventures are with Deb and Jack, but we do have some of our own. But this is another Deb and Jack story. The Boundary Waters is a great place to experience wildlife. Moose, mice, otters, loons, trumpeter swans, fox, snowshoe hare, snakes, butterflies, and occasionally a bear. We know bears roam the Boundary Waters freely. It is their home, after all. But it wasn't until our 9th trip, another adventure with Jack and Deb, that we actually saw a bear pretty up close and personal. We've read a lot of stories about bear encounters and suggestions for what to do if a bear comes near, so we felt somewhat prepared for a bear event. We were camped at a fairly popular location with several campsites close by. We had just finished a delicious dinner of chicken Alfredo and were relaxing in our chairs when a rather large black bear ambled out of the woods and started coming straight toward that enticing aroma. I grabbed a spoon and started banging on the pot lid. Steve had an emergency whistle in his pocket and he started blowing that. Wow, was that loud. The bear turned and ran off into the woods with Steve in hot pursuit. Always the curious one, Steve wanted to see where it was headed. A little while later, Deb went to their tent to get something and discovered her backpack was gone. We found it a short ways away, complete with teeth marks and tears. Little did we know that as we were enjoying our dinner, the bear was quietly rummaging through our campsite just beyond our line of sight. What did we learn that evening?
It's altogether different up close with Yogi.
And I learned, be prepared for the unexpected, be attentive to your surroundings.
Discovering Canada. One of our canoe trips took us up to the northern edge of the Boundary Waters, right close to the Canadian line, where we visited the well-known Curtin Falls, where Iron Lake flows into Crooked Lake. While paddling away from that area, I saw a small aluminum object floating in the middle of a lake. I thought it was an upside-down soda can. And I thought, how disgusting to see trash out here in the middle of this beautiful wilderness. As I got closer, I discovered it was not floating, it was stationary. It was the tip of a metal buoy, a marker of our international border with Canada. You see, when the US-Canadian border was finally established by treaty in 1909, a portion of the boundary passed through this vast region of lakes and rivers. Historically, many of these rivers and lakes were the pathways for travel and commerce, going clear back to the area of the French-speaking voyageurs of the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. Since both countries, US and Canada, wanted to maintain these trade routes, the border was laid out in many places going through the middle of these large lakes and rivers. There may be lines on maps, but the reality is that they don't really seem very significant in the middle of a wilderness lake, where the water on one side of the buoy looks just like the water on the other side. So what did we learn that day?
We were unintentional international travelers.
And I do appreciate international cooperation.
Here's a story from our most recent trip to the Boundary Waters this past summer. I know all God's creatures have a purpose, some harder to discern than others. There are beavers in the river behind our house. I'm okay with them in the river. I'm not okay with them when they are cutting down trees in our yard. In the Boundary Waters, I have to remind myself that I am the visitor. The beavers are at home. The portages between lakes and the Boundary Waters can be steep climbs over rocks and ridges. They can be fairly level, nice strolls through quiet woods, or they can be through or near swampy lowland that, depending on the amount of rainfall, can be somewhere between just a little muddy or a slog through muck up to your ankles. As you know, beavers like to build dams through swampy, wet areas. The portages and trails through the Boundary Waters are somewhat maintained by the Forest Service, but with hundreds of miles of trails, not all portages are cleared or easily navigated. We discovered this again this past summer when Steve and I were making our way to Home Lake. Now, this trip begins with a 2-mile portage from the parking lot to the first lake. Remember, Steve described how we double portage, which means this trip was actually a 6-mile hike. 2 miles out loaded, 2 miles back to the car, then 2 more miles back out with the second load. This was our 3rd time to Home Lake, but it had been 10 years since we'd been there. We thought we knew what to expect on this long portage. We decided to do half the portage, in other words, just 1 mile, drop our loads, then go back and get the second load. We thought that would be a better approach as we're a little older than we were the last time that we were there. Near the end of the first mile, we came to a swampy area, a little underwater, but not too bad. A bit further down the trail, and there it was, a new lake created by the beavers. The Forest Service boardwalk, installed to be just above the swamp, was completely submerged with only a post here and there to step on. Let's just say at that moment, I was not fond of all of God's creatures. I made it across without falling in. Steve made it across carrying the canoe. But then we had to go back to get our next load. Steve graciously offered to carry the other packs across the beaver dam, since the extra weight always causes me to lose what little balance I have already. 7 days later, on our way back and out of the Boundary Waters, Steve made 7 trips carrying the canoe and all our packs across that treacherous dam. What did we learn by crossing beaver territory?
We can always wash off the mud.
And I learned to be thankful for a supportive partner.
And finally, the real lake life. Some of the best moments in canoe country are morning moments. And there is plenty of morning, with some midsummer daylight before 5 a.m. The wind is often calm first thing in the morning, leaving lakes with a glass-like smooth surface. A single fish jumping to catch breakfast is an event. A merganser paddling serenely across the lake leaves a V-shaped wake that lingers behind for several minutes. The northern quiet may carry a distant raven's croak, and perhaps a few songbirds begin to twitter. A mist might linger in places as the sun begins to sparkle into the shady edges of the lake. Another fish jumps, maybe a splash somewhere as a moose climbs out of the water and disappears into the woods. I know the lakes in northern Indiana are popular summer destinations for many, but the real lake life is in the far north. On a clear, calm morning, coffee perking over the fire, a new day in a wilderness, and a new promise. So thank you for inviting us to share our experiences.
No, we've never had a question if we weren't into fishing. We're actually not fishing people. We've never really had much fishing. Now, Jack and Steve have done some fishing together, but we don't go up to fish. We go up to sit and read and just enjoy the beauty. No, we don't. We've not done that. No fish. We have a lot of peanut butter. It's good fuel.
Thank you again for being with us today.
You're very well. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming.
We actually don't fish, so we know people that, I mean, we've read stories about people that that's what they count on. They don't even take other food with them. They just assume they're going to catch fish. Well, I think it's kind of an odd assumption, but I like to have some food with me just to be sure. Yeah. Did you have lots of fish? Thanks so much. I'm sorry?